Hey guys, this video tutorial and the project that accompanies it are meant to be a continuation of the tutorial that we did last time on chords and scales. Last time we learned how to interpret the chord symbols that we see for songs that we're already familiar with, like we did Get Lucky by Daft Punk, and we figured out how to create those chord progressions inside of Pro Tools. So what we're going to talk about today is how you can start writing your own chord progressions for your own song. And the reason that this is so important is that when you start writing a song, the emotion of your song, the feeling of your song is going to come more than anything else from the chord progression that you use. By picking different kinds of chord progressions, we can make the song happier or sadder or epic or bittersweet or melancholy or adventurous or goofy. So it's really where we get to set the emotional tone of our song. And in order to figure out what kind of chord progressions do what, we have to learn about a very important music theory tool that's going to help you do this. And it is called dun, 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 the circle of fifths. That's supposed to be echo because this is so epic and important. So let's take a look at the circle of fifths and see how we use it. So if we do a Google search here for circle of fifths, did I just do Urkel of fifths? That would be funny. It figured it out and it did circle of fifths. Yay. Okay. And of course we have Wikipedia as the very first entry, as we do now for pretty much anything that we can possibly ever search for. But what I want is this image here. We have a bunch of different images for circles of fifths. I like this second one here. It's nice and clean and easy to look at. So here it is. Here's the circle of fifths. And you can see that there's sort of 12 pi wedges, and those pi wedges have an outer ring and an inner ring. And each part of that pi wedge contains a chord symbol. All right? So it represents a scale and a chord that can be made from that scale. Now you might notice that all of the chord symbols on the inner ring have a little M at the end of them, and we learned last time that that means that they are minor chords. All of the chords on the outside ring have no little m, and so they are major chords. Okay? Minor chords on the inside, major chords on the outside. And you'll see that there's, like I said, 12 symbols all the way around. There are 12 notes on a keyboard that just repeat over and over and over. And so every note on the keyboard and every possible scale and chord that you can make are represented by this circle of fifths. Okay? All right. Now, to understand how this circle of fifths is useful to us in writing chords, we need to take an example here of an existing chord progression. And let's take a look at what we did last time with Get Lucky by Daft Punk. So here are the chords again for Daft Punk, for Get Lucky by Daft Punk. There's 4 of them. There's B minor, there's D, there's F sharp minor, and there's E. Remember that the D and the E are major chords because they don't have a little M on them. And remember the little hashtag symbol here next to the F means F sharp, the black note immediately above F. Okay, so just try and remember those. B minor, D, F sharp minor, E. Boys don't fool elephants. That's how I'm going to remember it. Boys don't fool elephants. And the boys are minor and the fools are minor. Okay, that makes no sense. Let's just remember those chords. B minor, D, F sharp minor, and E. Okay, let's go look at the circle of fifths. And I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. And I just want you to find those chords. B minor, D, F sharp minor, and E. Take a second and find them on the circle of fifths. Remember, the minor chords are all in the center, and the major chords are on the outside. Do you notice a pattern? Okay, so the pattern is all of them are within 3 pi wedges next to each other on the circle of fifths. In other words, here is B minor, our first chord. Here is D in the same pi wedge. Here is F sharp minor, which is in the next pi wedge, and then finally E and the next pi wedge next to that. Okay, this is the pattern that you're going to find with virtually every group of chords that are used to play virtually every song in popular music. Those chords, when you look on a circle of fifths, and the scales that are made from that those chords are made from are going to be located within 3 pi wedges of each other on the circle of fifths. Now you can find exceptions, and like everything, this is a guideline, not a rule, but it's worth paying attention to. So when we want to make our own chord progression, a great way to start is to make sure that we're picking chords that are all within 3 pi wedges of each other on the circle of fifths. Okay? All right, so let's try it and let's make up a couple of chord progressions, and then we'll talk about some guidelines about how we can choose a chord progression that's going to be sad, or a chord progression that's going to be happy, or a chord progression that's going to be epic and adventurous, or bittersweet and melancholy. Okay? And here we go. Let's start a new Pro Tools session. So join along with me if you will. We're going to do a search PRO for Pro Tools, and we're going to open it up. And we're going to create a blank session. Now while this is opening up, I should point out that I'm using Pro Tools 11, as you can see. You are using, probably in our lab, you're using Pro Tools 8, or if you're in the larger YouTube universe, maybe you have a different version of Pro Tools. So this might look slightly different than what you're using, but it's going to be pretty much purely appearance only that's going to be different. The functionality is exactly the same. So don't be fooled by a slightly different looking interface. All the functionality is pretty much exactly the same. Okay? All right, so this is going to take a little longer than normal to open because I just loaded some new plugins. So I will pose a question. The Industrial Revolution was neither industrial nor was it a revolution. Discuss. Okay, I don't even know what that means, really. That doesn't mean anything. So I'm just stalling, frankly. Um, yeah. So let me say something else about the circle of fifths. At first, all of this stuff, the circle of fifths, chords, scales, feels a little bit like math class or something like that, okay? And it is a little bit like math class because math is built into music. But the cool thing is that once you learn these tricks and you start to learn how to make chords and how to make scales, you forget about all the math part of it and it becomes pure art. It becomes pure expression, okay? But you have to be willing to put in the work on the front side to get to that point where it can just become natural expression. When I write songs, and I've written a lot of songs in my life, I don't look at the circle of fifths anymore, and I don't really think about making a scale. I just play it. But that's because I've been doing it for a long, long time. So it's really worthwhile to go ahead and do this kind of mathy kind of stuff because it allows you to make beautiful music that expresses your emotions, and that's why we all do it. Okay, so we are going to make a blank session here. We're here in the quick start menu. Remember, if your quick start menu for whatever reason does not show up, if your Pro Tools menu, like we see right here, is across the top of our screen, we can just go to File, New, and it will take us to exactly the same place as our quick start menu. But we do have our quick start menu open, so select Create Blank Session and hit OK. And it's going to give us a dialog box asking us what we want to call it and where we want to save it. And as we always do, we're going to call it firstname.lastname.project name. And the project is going to be Chord Progressions. Okay, so first name, last name, Chord Progressions. Okay, now where are we going to save it? Well, as always, you should save it in your external E drive. I don't actually have an external E drive set up, so I'm just going to do it on in Documents. But again, you should be saving it in your folder that has your name inside of your external hard drive. Okay, cool. Here we go. And it opens up. Let's start right away by making a new track. We can either go to Track New or we can use the shortcut Command-Shift-N. And let's make one stereo instrument track and create. All right. Now this is going to be a track that you make along with me. So let's call it tutorial because it's going to be the one that you make along with me. Then you're going to make some other tracks after you're done where you can make your own chord progressions. Okay, and that's going to be hopefully the fun part. All right, well, hopefully it's all the fun part, or at least not miserable part. I hope we're not miserable. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is put an instrument on one of these inserts. Remember, if your inserts do not show up, you can click on this little sideways looking bookcase thing and select inserts to get them to show up. Then just click on the top one, and we are going to do multi-channel plugin, instrument, and let's do expand. We've been doing a lot of pianos, and maybe people are getting bored with pianos, so maybe we'll pick some different instruments this time, okay, just to keep it a little more exciting. So let's do this. Where it says beneath the waves here, let's change this to, how about we start with some strings? Let's do like a little orchestral thing, okay? So I'm going to go to bigger legato strings. Bigger legato strings. So we're under strings number 14, and then all the way at the top, bigger legato strings. Okay. Then we can close this, and let's go to our MIDI editor. So we're going to do Control equals to get our MIDI editor. Remember, you can always go to Window MIDI editor if you forget. Okay. And now, oops, I didn't mean to get a note there. Let's do some things to make sure that we're set up correctly. First of all, make sure that your grid is displayed by clicking on this button. If it's not already glowing greenish yellow, click on it so that it is. And then let's set our grid to eighth notes. We click on the little arrow and we do eighth notes. So we have 8 grids across a bar. Make sure that you have selected your bars and beats ruler across the top. If for some reason your bars and beats ruler is not displayed, all of the rulers are controlled by these horizontal line looking things here. Those are supposed to look like rulers. Click on them and I can just make sure that bars and beats is selected. Okay? Alright, so I've got my keyboard here and we're ready to start making chords. Let's make sure that we have sound here, and oh, there's our strings. That sounds very epic and orchestral already. Okay, all right, so what we have to do first is pick a starting chord, and picking the starting chord is almost like throwing a dart at a dartboard. It doesn't really matter where we start. What matters is where we go from that first chord, how we progress from one chord to another. That's what's going to create the emotion. Okay? Well, alright, that's not totally true. It does matter whether we pick a major chord or a minor chord. Okay? So let's go look at the circle of fifths for a moment. And here we go. And let's think about the starting chord. Alright, now here's a really big idea about chords and emotion inside of music. Here's the idea. Minor chords sound sadder. Major chords sound happier. All right? That's to 99% of the listening population. If you write a song that has lots of minor chords in it, it's going to be like, oh. If you write nothing but but major chords, it's going to be a much more upbeat, happy, uplifting kind of sound. Okay? So let's say to start off with, we want to do something happy and upbeat. We're going to write a song about puppies and cream cheese. Okay, so we're going to pick a major chord, one of these chords around the outside. Like I said, it doesn't really matter, okay? It just matters how we change after that. So let's just pick F. Let's pick F, okay? So we go back to Pro Tools, and we're going to make an F major chord in this first bar, all right? Now remember, we have lots of different Fs on the keyboard. We have 8 different Fs on the keyboard. For chord progressions, we always want to be somewhere in the middle of the keyboard, so somewhere between 3 and 5 on our keyboard. Okay, so somewhere in this range. So there's 2 Fs that we could use. I don't know. Let's use the one down here. All right. So we need to find F. How do we do that? We start with the one that we can always remember, the Dodge in the garage, which is D, right? So I find my 2 black notes that form my 1-car garage, and the white note inside that garage is the Dodge, D. All right, so here's D. So I want to find F. E, F. Remember that the letters, just the pure letters with no sharps or no flats, are always going to be white notes. So, boom. I'm going to make an F there, all right? Okay, next, I need to make the scale for F major. And After we do this, I'm going to show you a trick that's going to allow you to make the chord without making the scale first. But just one time, let's review it real quick. So remember what we do is we make our starting note first, and then we start going up the keyboard according to the formula whole note, half note, whole note, whole note, whole note, half note. And that's going to give us the other 7 numbers of our scale. 2 wholes and a half, 3 wholes and a half. Okay, so here we go. 1 whole, 2 wholes and a half. Remember, a whole note means skip a line. A half note means don't skip a line. And then 3 whole notes and a half. Whole note, whole note, whole note, half note. And I wind up, you notice, back on F, right? I started right underneath the 2-car garage. I wound up right underneath the 2-car garage. So I know I have that correct. All right. Now, as you may remember from last time, to turn this scale into a chord, I'm going to use the first, the third, and the 5th note of that scale, and I'm going to get rid of everything else. All right. So I'm going to get rid of the second. Let's zoom in here so you can see it. Here's the second one. I'm going to get rid of it. Here's the 4th one. I'm going to get rid of it. Here's the 6th, 7th, and 8th ones. I'm going to draw a box that touches all of them, hit delete, and get rid of those. And there's my 3 notes. Okay? All right, now, here comes the shortcut, so we don't have to make these scales every time we want to make a chord. A major chord is always going to have this shape: a note, 3 blank rows, a note, and 2 blank rows. It's always going to look like that. The only thing that's going to change when I'm making a major chord is where it starts. The F major chord starts on F, the G major chord starts on G, and so forth. So if we want to make new major chords now, we just need to move this shape to a different starting point. Okay, that's going to make life kind of easier. Okay, all right. So now here's the next thing. How long do I want this chord to last before I go to another chord? Well, basically, there's 3 choices that get used 99% of the time. Half a bar, 1 bar. I don't know what half a bar would be. There's half a bar, 1 bar, or 2 bars. Okay? Now, can you find songs where it's less than that or more than that? Yeah, but they're really pretty uncommon. Okay? So those 3 choices are going to take care of a lot of possibilities for us. All right? So let's say that I want this chord to last for a whole bar. Okay, so I am going to maybe drag this out 1 more 8th note so it looks like that. And then the bar, if I go up to the top, is going to go to right here. Here's the 2nd bar where this blue arrow is, right? So I'm going to extend my chords throughout that 1st bar by selecting it with the box, holding down Option, and dragging a copy, dragging a copy, and dragging a copy. Okay? And I get this. Okay? Now, I think I want to slow down the tempo a little bit. So, incidentally, if we haven't verified this already, remember that whenever we do this kind of work, we want to be in grid mode. Okay? Only in grid mode. We never use spot or shuffle, pretty much. Occasionally we might use slip, but really when we're doing this kind of work, we're always going to be in grid mode. Okay? All right, so great, I have this. Now let's say that I want to go to a new chord. Here's where I got to use the circle of fifths. Okay? Oh, I was going to change the tempo. Let's do that. So I'm going to double click on the little red triangle here. I'm going to change my tempo to, I don't know, 90. Okay? Okay, so let's go to the circle of fifths now, and we can figure out what chord I want to go to after F major. Remember, that's what we just made. So I go to the circle of fifths, and I can see that F major is next to all of these guys. C, G to one direction, B flat, E flat to the other direction. I'm just doing major chords right now because I'm trying to make a super happy kind of chord progression. Okay? All right. So let's go to, from F, let's go to G. All right. So I'm going to go from F to G, and then I'm going to go from C and back to G. Okay, so my chord progression is going to be F, C, G, C. F, C, G, C. F, C, G, C. F, C, G, C. That's kind of hard to say fast. Okay, back to Pro Tools. And I've already made F. Now I want to make C in the next bar. Okay, here's where that trick comes in. Instead of remaking the chord, the scale for the C major chord and taking the first, the third, and the fifth note, I know the shape is going to stay exactly the same, and it's just going to move to a different starting point. So all I have to do is take this shape that I just made and copy it so that it starts with the bottom note on C instead of F. Okay, now where is C? Well, I know that right here is my Dodge in the garage, that's D, so if I go down one, I'm going to be on C, okay? So right where these top notes already are. So I'm going to make a copy and move it up into this second bar so that the bottom note is lined up with the top note in the original chord. All right, hopefully that made sense. I'm going to do this. I'm going to hold down Option, I'm going to drag, and I'm going to move it up so that the bottom note, the starting note, is C. All right, so now I have the C major scale, because remember, they always keep the C major chord because they always keep the same shape. All right, now I want it to go from C to G. All right, well, where is G? Well, if this is, let's see, is that actually what I wanted to do? Let me look at the chord progression again real quick. F, C, G, yeah, okay, F, C, G, C was what I said, okay? All right, so back to Pro Tools again. So now I want to copy this and make it start on G. Well, where's G? Well, if this is F, right, remember we started on F, then going up the keyboard, there's G, the next white note up, okay? So I'm going to hold down Option, I'm going to drag, and I'm going to put it right there, all right? So now it's starting on G. And now I'm going to go back to C again from the last bar, because chord progressions usually last for 4 bars or 2 bars or 8 bars. Remember, everything in music tends to happen mostly in multiples of 2 and 4. Okay, multiples of 4, really. So I'm going to make this whole chord progression last 4 bars. That's what Daft Punk's tune Get Lucky did, and probably a lot of the other ones that you looked at. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to grab this chord one more time, and I'm going to have it go back to C. Alright, now let's listen to what we just made. And hopefully this sounds kind of upbeat and positive and peppy and happy and all that stuff. Oh, that sounds pretty happy, right? That's not a song about a breakup or puppies dying or anything horrible or sad. That's a pretty happy kind of sound. Okay? Okay. Now, what happens if we were to make all of those chords minor instead? Well, let's go back to the circle of fifths again for a minute. And you will see that if I were to pick those chords being minor instead, in other words, F minor, C minor, G minor, and back to C minor, well, here are those chords right here. Those are also in 3 pi wedges next to each other, F minor, C minor, G minor, C minor, okay? So it still should sound good, but because they're minor chords, it should sound a lot sadder. So let's go back here. And if there's one thing that I've discovered about people between the ages of 12 and 17, you guys want to make sad music in general, not happy music, which I can relate to, you know. It's like really when you're sad, that's when you really want to express it artistically. When you're suffering, you want to get it out there in some form. So we have a tendency to write music that is kind of sad. But I encourage you also to look at the happy side of the universe as well occasionally. Okay, so let's make all of these chords into minors. And I'm gonna go right to the trick. We're not going to make the scale this time. I'm going to show you how to turn a major chord into a minor chord. This first chord is C major. Why is it C major again? Because it starts on C, that's the bottom note, and then it has 3 rows on the bottom and 2 rows on the top. Okay, 3 empty rows on the bottom, 2 empty rows on the top. All right. To make it a minor chord, it turns out the only thing that I have to do is grab the middle one and pull it down 1 row. That's it. Now it's a minor chord. What? That's going to make it sad? Yeah, that's going to make it sad. Why? We don't know. Nobody really knows. It just does. Isn't that crazy? Okay, so you might notice that if it's minor, there's 2 rows on the bottom, 3 rows on the top. If it's major, it's the opposite. 3 rows on the bottom, 2 rows on the top. The way that I remember this is that a minor, like think of minor deal. What's a minor deal? A minor deal is a little deal, okay? So a minor deal has the little space on the bottom. A major chord, major deal, big deal, has a big space on the bottom, okay? So minor, little space on the bottom, major, big space on the bottom, okay? Okay, so we're going to minors, right? So now I'm going to do the same thing with my second chord. I'm going to move it down 1 row. Third chord, same thing, move it down 1 row. And last chord, move it down 1 row. I've just made all of these major chords into minors. But they are minor chords that are still next to each other on those pi wedges in the circle of fifths. Okay? So it should make sense. Let's give it a listen. Oh no! Everything horrible is happening. I went to the store and they were out of donuts, and I didn't have any donuts. And it was very unfortunate because I like donuts. All right, so hopefully this is making sense to you guys that the minor chords are sounding sadder and the major chords are sounding happier. It might be at first your ear's not used to thinking this way and you're just kind of like, I don't know what you're talking about. If that's the case, I'm just going to ask you to accept and trust that that seems to be the reaction amongst the vast percentage of the population when they hear minor chords. They think of sad things. When we hear major chords, we think of happy things. Okay, cool. So the last thing that we can do is we can combine majors and minors. Personally, I think that the most interesting chord progressions are chord progressions that put together majors and minors, because very rarely are we totally happy and very rarely are we totally sad. Most things in life are kind of bittersweet. There might be something kind of cool about them and something kind of sad about them. Okay, so if we combine majors and minors, we usually get a more complex and interesting emotional experience. Okay. So let's see what that might look like. Let's go back to our circle of fifths by doing this. And let's say that we want to stay with, now here's an interesting thing. If you start with a major and go to a minor, it tends to sound bittersweet, melancholy, kind of like you're sitting wistfully thinking about something nostalgically in the past or missing somebody or something like that. If we go from major to minor, it tends to sound more epic, adventurous, heroic, triumphant. Kind of think of it as we're going from sadness into happiness. All right? So that's something to think about. Minor to major tends to sound kind of epic, like we said. Major to minor tends to sound kind of bittersweet, melancholy. All right? So let's say that we want to do something sort of epic, adventurous, and so we're going to go from minor to major. So I've got a C minor here. What could we go to for a major? Well, we could go to A flat. All right? So let's say that we're going to go to A flat, and then we're going to go from to F minor to E flat. We're going to stay on these 2 pi wedges right here, okay? So we're going to go C minor, A flat, F minor, E flat. C minor, A flat, F minor, E flat. Okay, so let's go back to Pro Tools. And my C minor is already there. Now I want to go from C minor to A flat. Did I do that right? C minor to, C minor to E flat, F minor to A flat. Okay. So we're going to go to E flat, major. How do I do that? All right, well, first of all, I have to move this from starting on C to starting on E flat. So I'm going to grab this whole chord and I'm going to move it down to E flat. Well, hopefully we are down with the Dodge in the garage kind of thing here. So here's the Dodge in the garage, in the one-car garage. So that's D, Whoops, there, that's D right there. So that means that's E. E flat means the black note immediately underneath E, right? Flat means down, like you get a flat tire in your car and the car goes down because the tire went flat, okay? So I'm going to drag this down to there, okay? Now it's E flat major, and what does that mean? That means I have to take the middle row and I have to move it up one so that I have 3 on the bottom, major deal, big deal, 2 on the top, okay? All right, now I am going to go to, I have a terrible memory, so I have to look again at the circle of fifths. F minor, right? I went from C minor to E flat. Now I'm going to go from F minor to A flat, okay? So I want to move to F minor, all right? Well, this is already a minor chord, so I'm not going to have to change the shape. I just need to move it to start on F minor. So I'm going to take this and move it down to F minor, and that turns out to be, right, or move it down to F, right there. Remember, I don't need to change the center row because it's already a minor chord. Minor deal, little space on the bottom. Okay? And then finally, I want to go to A flat major. So I'm going to have to do 2 things. Move it to start on A flat and move that middle row up 1. Okay? So I'm going to select all these notes. I'm going to move them down to A flat. This is A right here, so this is A flat. So I'm going to move it down there, and then I'm going to move this up 1 row, and there's A flat major. Okay? Let's give a listen to all of that and see how it sounds. Okay, so I made a mistake on this chord right here, sorry. We said that we were going to F minor, and I did not move this to F minor. What did I do wrong? Sorry, guys. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I'm sorry. I started on C minor, and I did not actually, the first chord is wrong. Forgive me. Let's move that real quick. It won't be hard at all. Let's go back to Pro Tools. Right now, this is a minor chord, but it's actually F minor. It's not C minor. C minor would be here because that's C. Dodge in the garage, there's C. So there's C minor, there's E flat major, there's F minor, and there's A flat major. Okay? So now we can hear the whole thing. Here we go. So, does this at all give you a feeling of something heroic happening, something kind of epic? Can you imagine somebody overcoming some kind of difficulty, perhaps? Can you imagine a group of people, like an army trying to come over the top of a mountain and overcome some other army in battle? Can you, I don't know. So that's an example of combining majors and minors. Okay? Okay. So that's all there is to it, right? So to quickly review, what we have to remember is that we have 2 kinds of chords, majors and minors. The majors are happier, the minors are sadder, and the only difference between them is whether they have 2 rows on the bottom and 3 rows on top, or 3 rows on the bottom and 2 rows on top. Look at the bottom set of rows. If it's small, it's minor. If it's big, it's major, okay? So this is a minor chord, 2 on the bottom, 3 on the top. Major chord, 3 on the bottom, 2 on the top. The starting note should always be the name of the chord. So if it's F minor, it starts on F. If it's E flat major, it starts on E flat. Okay? Now you guys are ready to try your own chord progressions. All right? So here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to make 3 tracks. Okay? One's going to be happy, one's going to be sad, and one's going to be mixed. So let's do that together right now. We're going to do Command-Shift-N, and we're going to make 3, see I just hit 3 there because it was already highlighted, stereo instrument tracks. And I'm going to hit Create. And then let's call the first one Happy. Let's call the second one I can just hit the next button here to go to the next track. Let's call the second one sad, and let's call the next one mixed. So this is going to be, the first one is going to be all major chords. The second one is going to be all minor chords, and the third one is going to be mixed chords. Okay, so in other words, some major, some minor. Okay, make each one of them last 4 bars, just like this one. So you should have 4 blocks that are all the same length at the end. Even though we could make these chords last for more than 1 bar, for now, just for the exercise, let's make each chord last 1 bar. Okay? All right. So remember, just to review really quickly how we would do this is we'd start off by going to the circle of fifths. Oops, I just opened iCal by mistake. I don't want to do that. Force quit. Goodbye. So we're going to go back to the circle of fifths, and if we're doing our happy chords, we're going to stay completely on the outside ring. If we're doing our sad chords, we're going to stay completely on the inside ring. If we're doing mixed, we're going to go back and forth between the inside and the outside ring. And we want to stay in any 3 pi wedges. So we could do G, D, A, we could do D flat, A flat, E flat, we could do D minor, A minor, E minor, we could do A, G, C, okay, as long as we are within 3 or 2 pi wedges, 3 or less pi wedges. Okay? So that's the idea. Try and come up with 3 chord progressions. If you want, you can change the instrument to something other than strings. You could do a piano or a keyboard, or horns, or anything else that you want, okay? And you can change the tempo if you want to as well. Experiment, see what you like, okay? If you really like one of the chord progressions and it sounds good, try putting a beat to it. Try making a backbeat to it. If you get totally done and you're like, what do I do now? You can try making a backbeat to it, okay? Great. I think you guys are ready to go. Good luck and happy composing.